Smethurst continues. He says this: on paper, we should have fewer fears than any generation before us. We're surrounded by security systems, advanced medicine, organic food, endless information on a glowing rectangle in our pockets, yet we are deeply, miserably afraid. Far from losing the chokehold of fear, the material blessings of our age seem only to have tightened it. We've got all these things around us to mitigate fear, and yet fear is on the rise. What would Jesus say to that? Well, Jesus has a lot to say about that. In Matthew chapter 6, for example, he says, don't be anxious about your life. He continues, verse 27, which of you by being anxious can add a single hour to the span of his life? And then verse 34, he says, don't be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. And I love that he says, sufficient for today is its own trouble. You got enough to worry about today. Let's not worry about tomorrow. Okay, that's what Jesus has to say. So I want to make this distinction. This sermon isn't about that kind of fear. We'd be in Matthew 6, not Matthew 27, if this sermon was about that kind of fear. Jesus is plain about that. That we aren't to be anxious. I'm not talking about that when we're not talking about that when we're talking about the fear of the Lord. It's altogether different. It is not the same fear, though it may seem like it. But both are about power and control. When you think about anxiety and fear, that's what really the anxiety and fear of not being in control and not having the power ourselves. And the second fear is related to the one who has it, all the power and control, because you don't have it, he does. So the first fear, anxiety, is about not having fear and control. The second fear is recognizing the one who does. You feel the tension, feel the difference. This one produces the fear of the Lord. Why? Because he has all power and all control, and you fear, that reverential respect mixed with fear and wonder. Anxiety is just about the fear and the anxiousness we can have in our hearts when we realize we're not in power, we don't have the power, and we're not in control. It becomes very apparent, when the swimming pool is sloshing out both ends, you're like, man, I don't have control over much, actually. And Jesus would say, don't be anxious about that. So what do we do as we wrap up? Well, simply, you put away the one and you cultivate the other. And it's easier said than done. But I think they're related. I think an increased fear of the Lord, by extension, reduces the anxieties and the fears of our life.